Today we'll be building Dagath to absolutely destroy Steel Path without using a single Forma. And whether you prefer being an invulnerable powerhouse or using a Spectral Stampede to crush your enemies, I've got a build for you. So grab a coffee, sit back, and relax, because this is everything you need to know about the Spectral Queen.
Arise.
And you'll be able to easily replicate what you just saw by the end of the video, as I'm going to walk you through everything you need to know about her. Starting with her abilities. Wyrd's Scythes is Dagath's first ability, and upon casting it, we will summon a bunch of sickles that orbits around us before shooting out. Enemies hit by this will be inflicted with the viral status along with being slowed, which is always a nice touch for crowd control. But perhaps the best part about this ability is that any enemies hit will also spread the effect of Doom. Now, you might be wondering what is Doom. Doom is Dagath's second ability, and upon casting it, we will doom enemies in a cone shape in front of us. And what this basically does is summon a scythe above their heads, and a percentage of damage that doomed enemies take will be dealt to them a second time after a short delay. However, if the scythe's damage is enough to outright kill the enemy, the delay will be removed and the scythe will immediately deal its damage. However, if you're planning on using her as a weapons platform, we actually have a way of applying Doom without needing to cast her second ability. Introducing Grave Spirit. This is Dagath's third ability, and upon casting it, we'll gain a buff that gives our weapons extra critical damage. And this effect is actually doubled when attacking doomed enemies. Furthermore, our buff has infinite duration and remains active indefinitely until we suffer a lethal hit. And upon taking a lethal hit, we'll enter a spectral state and become invulnerable for 10 seconds. Any enemies killed while we're in our spectral form will drop a guaranteed health orb. And once the duration of our spectral form ends, our ability will enter a cooldown of 25 seconds before it can be cast again. We'll usually want to always cast this at the start of the mission, as the buff lasts indefinitely. However, that is not the case if we're using her Augment. Spectral Spirit allows us to immediately enter our spectral form upon casting the ability. And just like how it worked previously, we'll still receive extra critical damage along with being completely immune to enemy fire. This also includes knockbacks and other status effects. Furthermore, the Augment also allows us to apply Doom simply by hitting enemies with our weapons or abilities while in our spectral form. And once our spectral form ends, the ability will go into a cooldown as per usual. That being said, the Augment allows us to reduce the cooldown of this ability by 1 second for every enemy killed while outside our spectral form, which means that by simply killing a couple of enemies, we're able to recast this ability in no time, pretty much being invulnerable for most of the run. That being said, we actually have a way to have a 100% uptime on our invulnerability, and we can easily achieve this using Vazarin's Protective Sling, because upon dashing through our Warframe, we'll receive a 5-second invulnerability window, which is usually enough for us to kill a bunch of enemies and reactivate our spectral form. And if we do need extra time, we can simply dash through our Warframe again. I would also highly recommend using Magus Cloud to increase the radius of our Void Dash hitting our Warframe. With this equipped, we can simply swap to our operator and tap the jump button twice to get our invulnerability. But with that out of the way, let's go over Dagath's signature ability. Rakhali's Cavalry is Dagath's fourth ability, and upon casting it, we'll summon 5 horses in front of us that'll charge forward. Furthermore, we'll get iframes and are immune to damage while casting this ability. The horses are also able to run up slopes and run through walls. Now, the ability on its own doesn't do much damage. However, if used on doomed enemies, it will remove a portion of their shields and armor before dealing the damage. Which means that as long as enemies are inflicted with Doom, we're able to one-shot Steel Path using her horses. But that's not all, because our horses will actually continue to damage enemies as long as they are in contact with them. Furthermore, the horses can even damage enemies while they are being summoned. Therefore, if we summon the horse right on top of the enemy, each horse actually damages them for about 6 times per second, which is actually an insane amount of damage. So if we ever need to take down a particularly tanky enemy, we can simply get in range of them and summon our horses right on top of them. This will melt pretty much anything in regular Steel Path. But now that we know how her abilities work, let's go over how to actually mod her. And in this section, I'll showcase two builds: an Immortal weapons platform build and also a caster nuke build. And you'll be able to fit both of these without using a single Forma. Starting off with the caster build. We'll use Brief Respite in the aura slot as it fits the innate polarity of it. We'll also use Catalyzing Shields in order to easily shield gate every time that we cast an ability. We'll also use Streamline and Fleeting Expertise to boost our ability efficiency. But since efficiency caps out at 175%, we'll keep Fleeting Expertise at rank 4. However, if you only own a rank 5 Fleeting Expertise, then feel free to use that. This is because ability duration is not that important on a caster Dagath, because after enemies get doomed, they can usually expect to get run over by a bunch of horses. Therefore, the duration of our doom does not matter as much. That being said, we can't neglect duration entirely, as our horses will despawn too quickly mid-run if we don't have enough duration. Therefore, we'll slot in Continuity to bring our duration back up to around 80%. And in order to freely spam our abilities, we're going to use both Flow and Natural Talent. Flow will provide us with a comfy capacity of energy, and Natural Talent is a must-have in my opinion. This is because her 4th ability takes forever to cast, and using Natural Talent will allow for a better and smoother gameplay. And as for ability strength, we actually only need 143% in order to fully strip enemies with 2 hits of Cavalry. And because our horses actually deal multiple instances of damage, we're basically guaranteed a full strip with a single cast of our 4th ability. Therefore, we'll slot in Umbral Intensify as it gives us all the ability strength we'll need. Lastly, we'll slot in Stretch in order to increase our ability range of our 1st and 2nd abilities, which in turn makes spreading doom a lot easier. But if you want to become an Immortal powerhouse, then the next build is what you came here for. This build focuses on staying invulnerable and buffing her weapons using her Augment mod. And we're going to use Brief Respite in the aura slot as it matches its innate polarity. We'll also use Equilibrium and Flow for our energy economy. This is because every enemy killed while in our Spectral form will drop a guaranteed health orb, and with Equilibrium equipped, we'd be getting a ton of energy. And in the remaining slots, we'll slot in mods in order to boost our ability duration and strength. I'm also equipping Catalyzing Shields, just in case you aren't running Vazarin's Protective Sling. As for the arcanes, I'm using Arcane Concentration for extra ability duration and Arcane Acceleration for my Kuva Bramma. I love using the Kuva Bramma because it is just so powerful. And while using her 3rd ability, we're also immune to knockbacks. This is the build for the Kuva Bramma, but do note that I have a toxic progenitor. However, this build is not complete on its own, and does suffer from some ammo issues, which is why I chose to run the carrier as my sentinel. And this is the build for my carrier for those that are interested, though the only important mod you need will be ammo case. And I know this is not the best, so do let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions to improve my companion build. But now that we've got the builds out of the way, let's go over how to actually use Dagath. And we'll start off with the caster playstyle. At the start of the mission, we'll want to cast our 3rd ability to get a permanent buff and extra life. And for our ability rotation, we'll cast our 1st ability, then our 2nd, and lastly our 4th. This is because our 1st ability will orbit around us for a duration before shooting out. And by the time we've casted our 2nd ability to inflict doom on enemies, our 1st ability should have finished orbiting and will shoot out to enemies. This will then spread doom to even more enemies, ensuring that our 4th ability always hits doomed enemies. And remember that you can always spawn your horses right on top of beefier targets. And for our Immortal build, the playstyle is even easier. Simply cast our 1st ability in order to activate Arcane Concentration, then cast our 3rd ability for our buff and immortality. All abilities and attacks now have the effect of doom, which means that we can always cast our 4th ability in order to strip or deal with a particularly beefy enemy. Or you could also just kill things with your weapon. And whenever our buff runs out, we'll use Vazarin's Protective Sling to grant ourselves immunity. Then kill a bunch of enemies and repeat the process by casting our 1st and 3rd abilities. Dagath has been such a blast to play with, and I honestly had a ton of fun making this video. I'll also be making many more Zero Forma builds. And if you're anything like me with a ton of unmodded Warframes just sitting around, then you might enjoy my upcoming videos. And if you want to know why Saren is always regarded as one of the best Warframes, then be sure to check out this video, where I walk you through everything you need to know about the Plague Goddess. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya!